Hey everyone, Ivar the Black here today. Today I thought that I would go through the process of how I make a rattan sword. I think that this is a thing that lots of new fighters maybe overlook or aren't taught as well as they could be. The idea being, well, let's just get a weapon in your hand and we'll get you out there and we'll get you fighting. But maybe give us some thought to what works for you and some of the techniques that you can use to build one of these rattan swords. So I'm going to show you how to make my rattan sword. I'm not saying it's the only way to make a rattan sword, and I'm not even saying it's the best way to make a rattan sword. I am saying it's the way that I make them, it's the way that I like them. So I'll go through the process of from a raw stick of rattan to a finished product. So I'll show you how to make, how to plane it, or how I like to shape it, how I like to shape the handle, how I like to make the thrusting tips, how I like to tape them up, how I like to put the basket hilts on, and how I like to put the trigger on, the thing that holds it to my hand. So yeah, without further ado, let's get going. Okay, so the first thing we have to do is, I like to plane down rattan that's, I think, too thick. So this is a really thick piece of rattan. It's too heavy to swing, and it's too fat to get a good grip on, and so I like to plane it down so it's, in my preference, I like them 1.25" planed, and then, you know, reasonably thick, reasonably long, because I like a nice oval sword shape to sort of start with. So there's lots of different ways to plane a sword, or a piece of rattan, as it were. The way that I like to use is with a power planer. Some guys like to use a table saw. I never got the knack of that. Other guys like a draw knife. I never got the knack of that. Some guys like to use a jigsaw, and that never made any sense to me. So a long time ago, I bought a power planer, just a hand one. I'll show it to you in a second. And I think it's well worth the investment. I've planed dozens and dozens of swords with it, and I think it's probably the fastest way to go. So I'm going to go grab it, and I'll be right back. Okay, so here I've got my power planer. Nothing fancy here. I think it was probably a Home Depot special, Black & Decker. Just has like a rotating blade at the bottom here. I've got it set to its, to take the biggest chunk it can, just because that seems to be the best for rattan. Rattan's a bit wavy. So, yeah, it's a kind of a dangerous thing, so you got to keep your hands clear. You got to wear eye protection. It's pretty loud, so I wear ear protection. And yeah, it's planed 1 or 2 pieces of wood and dozens and dozens of sticks of rattan. So I'm going to get this thing going here. Oh yeah, one more thing. I like, the easiest way that I found to do this is to stick it. You can stick it in the vise if you want, but you got to be very careful that you don't hit the vise with the planer. I like this old workbench thing. It's got a little kind of a vise thing here. It's got grooves cut in here and in here, so it's easy to grab a round piece of rattan or something right in sort of in the middle. And yeah, this thing has got to be 30 years old. I've had it forever. But I just kind of stick it right in there so that it's got, so I got someplace to go. And then I just kind of start planing. So I just do, you know, sort of nice even swipes at it until it looks like, I don't know, I'm sort of 2/3 of the way there. I'll show you in a sec. Set too small. I do. There we go. So I've got this set to take off 1/16 of an inch, and I did 3 swipes, so that's approximately 3/16. Then I flip it over, making sure that I do it, you know, so that the flat is on the bottom. And I do it to the other side. taken a few swipes off of both sides. You can kind of see that that's getting there. I like to kind of gauge it out. I like to gauge it out here to see how we're doing. And I could probably take a swipe off of both sides. Just at the tip there. Yep, I don't think I want to take any more off the sides. Although it's pretty thick at the bottom here. Should be fine though. I could take that down. Okay, so that's about as thin as I want. Now, I don't like these hard edges on the sides, so I actually plan this on 6 parts, right? Top, bottom, and then each one of the corners. Just so I can get a nice, closer to a nice oval shape as my sort of starting point to build that sword. So that's 6 sides planed, and that's starting to feel a little more like a proper sword. If it's really thick, sometimes I take the skin off the back of it if I want to thin it down a bit, but this is okay. I think I might take another swipe off of the corners just to skinny it down a bit. It's a little big for my taste. So what I'm trying to do here is leave the thickness at the thickest point alone and just take some weight off. This should be the last cut that we do. So that's an excellent place to start. So now that we've planed it up, I guess I can take those off. So now that we've planed it up, we can go over to the vise and stick it in there and start kind of sanding down some of these sharp corners. You might be wondering what happens if you take too much off. And if you take too much off, well, that's just a bit of a hard lesson to learn, because if you take way too much off, you can't even really build this side up with tape. So it takes a bit of a touch to try to figure out exactly how much you want to take off versus how much you want to leave on. It's all a personal preference thing. I've been at this for 30 years, and so I got a pretty good idea of what I like in a sword. But yeah, I guess maybe a few words on why I started with planing. Some guys like to cut off exactly, all their swords are 35 inches, for example. I'm more of a cut the, like, you know, it's in a sword shape. I cut it off to be about 38 inches maybe, and then plane it down and see how it feels. Maybe it wants to be a long sword, maybe it wants to be a shorter sword if it's a little heavy. You know, I think the Rattan's kind of got a, I don't know, a bit of a way that it wants to be. Maybe that's getting too metaphysical, but sword making is different for everybody. Frankly, everyone kind of makes it a little bit different, and that's how I make mine. So, okay, I'm going to go sand this off. I'll meet you all over at the workbench. All right, welcome to my very messy workbench. Excuse the mess, we're between maids here in the garage. So yeah, what I'd like to do is sand this guy down a little bit now, make him nice and smooth and comfortable for the hand. And it just, I don't know, seems to feel better if it's a smoother sword. So it's got these sort of ridges from when I planed it. So I'm going to take, I don't know, a little bit of, I don't want to damage the rattan too much. So I shove a piece of leather in here. Stick this in here, and so, I don't know, I suppose some folks would like to use a power sander of some kind for this sort of thing, but I like to use this, I like to do it by hand for some reason. I don't know. It feels more like I'm working it, I guess, or something. I don't know. Anyway, so all I really do is just, this is some medium grit emery cloth. I just kind of, you know, create a ton of dust. But yeah, just put it back and forth. There'd be a cleaner way to do this for sure, but I'm not doing that. Yeah, and so I just kind of like to have it, you know, not perfectly smooth all the way around, but just to take the hard edges off. So I'll do that. I'll probably speed up the video because no one wants to see this. It's a bit boring. One side that looks like feels like it's pretty good. Flip it over, do the same thing to the other side. Honestly, you could do this with some probably iron good sandpaper maybe, or something like that. Kind of anything that you get your hands on. I happen to have a bunch of emery cloth lying around, so that works out well. Something kind of nostalgic to me about the smell of rattan dust. Last little bit to go. And that's the sanding. And this side is definitely up. That's the way that's going to go. Okay, so I also like to round off the tip of the sword. Not round it necessarily, but take those corners right off of there. And for that, I just throw it on the belt sander for a little bit, just to round those off. Not sure why I belt sand that part, but hand sand that part, but that's what I do. All right, just to take the edge off of it, that's going to be the tip. And so next is marking out where the handle's going to be and carving on the handle. All right, so now's around the time that I like to figure out where the handle's going to be, where it's going to sit. And I just happen to have a basket hilt right here from Plasticsmitharmoury.com for all of your low profile, high quality, high density polyethylene armor needs. I've always got a few of these lying around in case anyone's ever looking for some. So all I really do is just slide the basket hilt on to where the sword kind of like where it goes to the bottom for this bottom tang. I like a 2-tang basket hilt. Some guys like to drill into the bottom of their basket hilts. It's all personal preference. Anyway, so I kind of mark out where that is going to go, and then I grab onto it, try to figure out where my hand is going to be. See if I can show that to you there. And so that's kind of where it wants to kind of go. And then all I really do is just slide the basket hilt off without letting go. Without letting go. And so that's where it wants to go. And so then I just mark this with a marker. Mark so that let's see if I can get on the camera there. Different camera. That's not much better. I mark where top of the hand's going to be, where the thumb comes around. Front of the hand. And then I mark the bottom as well. Right where my fingers kind of go. Then around the back. I always get a little ink on my hands for whatever reason. All right, back of the hand. Just kind of where my mitts want to live. So then I end up with something like that. And so this, I like to carve down reasonably thin, because then I like to build it back up with tennis racket tape, which I'll show you after I carve it down. So here, what I want most out of this is this ring. I want this ring to be nice, to be thinner than everything else, because that's just, I like to know where home is. And that's what helps me center what home is on my sword. So that's the first thing I got to carve down. So there's a few different ways that I can do this. I've got a wood file here that helps me kind of jag it down. I've got a wood rasp here that I tend to use. My wood rasp is getting kind of dull, so I'm going to try something different just for you folks to see how this all turns out. I recently rediscovered this wood rasp bit, so I'm going to throw it into my my drill here, and that might be a better way. Might go a little faster. Let's see how it goes. It's been a while since I've used it. I've made more swords with this wood rasp than I care to name, but let's see how this one goes. That just digs right in there, doesn't it? It's making a bit of a mess, but I think it's something that we can salvage here. Good. Okay, well, let's see how that feels. Oh yeah, that's about right. It's kind of messy here, but we'll smooth all that out with time here. Okay, well, let's finish up. So I've got the basic shape. I know that's kind of where home is, and so I'm just going to get this a little flatter and this a little flatter, and then we'll see from there. So this is more just touch than anything else. However I shape these handles, whether it's with the wood rasp or with the drill or whatever, all I really end up doing is just grabbing onto it and seeing how it works, right? So right now, my thumb wants a little more room, I think. So I'm gonna give it some more room. And this is the fiddly part about making swords. I was always kind of envious of those rapier guys because they basically get a sword and they have it for a long, long time. Whereas us rattan fighters, we have to rebuild these things, 10 times a year it seems. All right. I want more off the back here entirely. All back off of there. Yeah, we're definitely getting there. So you might be wondering, you know, why, what am I doing here? And it really is just I kind of want to like the feel of the sword. It's very much a touchy-feely kind of thing, so I'm just going to keep working it until I like it. One of the things that I like to do is I like to leave this part pretty thick and then thin down these parts. So I like to have these two fingers have sort of more stick to grab onto than these two fingers. That's because that's a personal preference of mine. So I'm gonna take down this part. That's starting to feel a little more like home here. This is, I think this part here for me is too aggressive, so I'll have to sand that down. But we're getting a lot closer to what I like to have here. There's a little flat bit there that my index finger really likes, so I'm going to keep that there. So I'm just going to keep working this until it feels right, and I'll keep yammering on, or you can fast forward until we get to the good stuff. I think I'm going to stop with this. I'm going to go back to the hasp. I think the hasp was quite a bit thicker than that little bit that I was using. That's why it feels so off. That's getting there. So for the fine tuning, the rasp seems to be what it wants to do. And then for the bulk stuff, getting much, much closer. Just a little bit of work in the fingertips there, I think. So my sword's, whoa, that's weird. Okay, no, that's got to go. I made a weird bump there that my hand doesn't like at all. That's a little better. All right, just about. This is more right-hand biased for me. Most of my swords are right-hand biased. I can use them in my left, it's not that big a deal. My left, as my secondary hand that I only occasionally fight single sword with, it seems, doesn't seem to mind this right-hand biased sword. So I think we're just about done. I'll get it maybe a little bit thinner, and then I'll smooth it out. No, maybe not. I think, well, I'm gonna smooth it out and see how it fits. And the smoothing it out, I like to do by hand. When I say smooth out, I don't mean perfectly smooth, not smooth like this. I just want, I don't know, I want it to be a little smoother underneath the, under the tape. Because that's, again, all personal preference. Funny thing about handles is that they are just about as unique as fingerprints, it seems. You give any kind of guy this sword handle, and this is a pretty generic one. It's not very aggressive in either way. It's got its own little bit of bits of characteristics, but it's the lumps and bumps in it are pretty subtle. Not as subtle as some, but some guys like a square handle, and some guys like a really round handle, and some guys like a really weirdly shaped handle, and it's funny how we all get our personal preferences out of this stuff. All right, so I like to feel how the sword jumps when I squeeze my hand to see how exactly it's going to work. I need it to be able to slide across the palm a little bit, so it can't have any grabs here, and it's got a little bit there, so I'm going to take some of that off. That's got to be close to done. Yep, that feels better. So now we smooth it out, and that will be the handle carved. All right. Oh, yep, that's the one right there. That feels great. One of the things I forgot to mention before was it's nice to have a bit of a baseline. So, you know, if you like your handles to be cut a certain way, they should be as consistent as you can make them. Some guys have a really excellent way of sort of making that consistent every time. I kind of go by feel and see how that goes. But my baseline's always been sort of a sword that I've always liked. This is the sword that I won my first crown with. It's the best sword I've ever built. It just feels like home. It's been retired, but I keep it around for nostalgia's sake. I hang it up on the wall, and I like the feel of how everything works here. So this is always what I'm trying to replicate, is to back here. So it doesn't look like much, but it was really good to me. Okay, so now that we've got our handle carved, I want to cover it up with tennis tape, and I'll tell you why as soon as we sort that all up. Bear with me while I look for my tennis tape. All right, so I'm back. I didn't have any of the racket tape that I like to use to wrap my swords, so I had to go to Canadian Tire and buy some. And so this is what that is. So it is just tennis racket tape, actually. I like the absorbent stuff because it gives me a little bit of sweat absorbency on my sword hand, and I really think there's no better thing to wrap your sword in. I really like it. It's sweat absorbent, it gives you a little extra grip, it's cushiony. I think it's just perfect. So let's get to it. So like I said, you can get this stuff at Canadian Tire. I think it's about $6 or $7 for 3 rolls. This little thing here is actually the finishing tape, so we just put that aside, open it up, and I always wrap from the bottom up because that puts the joins where the tape wraps around the wraps. It makes them face downwards, so all of the pressure is always going to be sort of going down. As you swing the sword, your hand wants to naturally kind of, as the centrifugal force, it wants to fly out of your hand. So if the wraps were facing up, it would curl the tape down. So that's why we always start it from the bottom. So I basically I give it a little bit of, there's probably enough to do the whole thing, but I like to kind of overwrap it. I give it a bit of a little space at the bottom here, just because I like to have a little extra in case I get a little bit excited when I wrap the thing and I wrap it too much. And this is where the brackets are going to sit anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And I just kind of wrap it up. So this stuff has kind of like a suede, leathery feel to it. And I really like, I wrap my swords in it. I wrap my shield handles in it, especially my round shield or oval shield or whatever. Anything that's got a sort of a center grip. I just really like it. I think it's just great. It was actually the guy who I first saw use it was my squire Herrick, and I mercilessly mocked him for it, thinking that, well, what's the point? You'd want to feel your sword in your hand, and that was just crap. He was right. This is way better. I can fight without a glove, and I really like it. So you can see, I even though I left a little bit too much, I'm sort of short here. I need to go to about here, so I'm going to do this again. I'm going to go up a little bit, and I'm going to be a little more conservative on the wrap. You want to give it enough of a go around at first so that it grabs onto itself. You can kind of see where I don't know if you can see it in the camera, but it leaves a little bit of a mark where your last wrap went, so you can kind of use that as a guide. And this is all, like everything else with sword building, just kind of a personal preference thing. I'm sure there's fighters out there that would never dream of wrapping their handle. Some fighters really like to use gloves. And I didn't mind. I used gloves for a long time, and then I got tired of them dying and me having to find new ones, sort of, or forgetting that I had, destroyed my glove at the last event and therefore needed the new one and all that kind of stuff. So this feels right. So we got a little bit at the end here. It's got a little bit of a adhesive thing at the end that you tear off. I don't really, some of you who know how to wrap tennis rackets would probably know all this stuff, but I'd learned this stuff sort of firsthand. All right, so that's that. I like to finish this off with a little bit of, well, I used to use electrical tape, but as it turns out, it's got its own thing, and so we'll use what came with it, I think.
got a little adhesive back. And it's kind of stretchy. And now I have a Wilson branded sword, which is fine because this white stuff will just be hidden by the basket hilt. All right, so that is that, and that feels really good to me. It's got, you can see it's got a bit of a bias where these fingers go, so I know where home is immediately, and then it's got a little more meat down here, so that when I'm grabbing with these bottom two fingers, it's wanting to snap forward. Yeah, and that's my sword handle. So next, let's put the basket hilt on. Here we have one of the basket hilts that I built from Plasticsmitharmoury.com. This is actually a slightly different design than I've made in the past. I'm experimenting with some new shapes, and so this will be sort of a trial run for that. I guess before we go into the basket hilt stuff, we should figure out a trigger of some kind. So let's do that. So the triggers that I like to use, some folks like to use like a regular finger trigger. Let me see if I can just dig out some. So the stuff that I like to use is just nylon webbing. You can see that there's nothing special to it. So some guys like to use a finger trigger. So when I used to use finger triggers, I would use these two fingers and I would just tape this up to the side of the sword and use that. And I don't do that anymore. I have a different style of trigger that some of you might know him, a fellow by the name of Gan, sort of either figured out or saw somewhere, or I'm not sure where exactly he figured this out, but he's another guy that I mercilessly mocked for this weird trigger, and then I started to use it and I really like it. So I call it a wrist trigger, and it just goes like this. So I put one wrap just straight down the side of the whole sword, another one down here. Maybe that's a little short. That's basically it. Then I give it a little bit of needs a little bit of play. And I just know how long this is from playing with my style of half gauntlet and everything else, but that's the whole thing. So a bit more like a lanyard, except when I tape it, I put sort of a half twist in it, up through the middle, and then down like this. And then that's no good at all. This has got to go way higher. So basically I can grab it where home feels. Yeah. Start all that again. This could be that I've gone a little bit high on my stick this time around with where I put my handle, but we'll see. So that feels about right. So I'm gonna temporarily tape this on the side just like this. Yeah, it seems that might be just a little bit long. I might have to cut the bottom of that off. We'll see how that goes. I thought I had measured it accurately against the basket hilt, but this is a bit of a different style basket hilt, so that could be what's going on here. Oh my gosh. You know, a more prepared guy would have all of this stuff sort of figured out and laid out before he went and tried to record a video, but nah, we're not going to do that. So for securing basket hilts and triggers and that kind of stuff, I just use hockey tape. It seems to be the best, gives me the best sort of combination of strength and ease to tear and stability and all that kind of stuff. Some guys use fiber tape. Some folks use just duct tape. Again, all personal preference. All right. So that feels about right. Okay, so the wrist trigger up and around so that I can't actually let go of the sword even if I wanted to. And what that gives me is a little extra spin on how the sword works. It allows me to really guide where the sword blade is with these fingers. So as the wrap comes around, I can reef on it, let go of it a little bit. Fingers on the sword still and guiding where the blade's going to be. But it just gives me a little extra. And who doesn't want a little extra? So I'm just going to dry fit my basket hilt on here, make sure everything seems good. That seems awful high to me, but we'll see. Nope, that's all good. That's where we want it. All right, well, that's the trigger placed. I'm gonna go and grab my half gauntlet to make sure that it's gonna fit in there properly. I'll be right back. All right, here's my ratty old half gauntlet here. And the way my whole system works is half gauntlet goes on. It's got just a little string around the palm, but hand doesn't go into the palm. So half gauntlet sits there, then this goes on, then the half gauntlet gets tied in. So that way, it's impossible for me to let go of the sword, and everything fits in there nice and snug. So I think that's probably just exactly where I want it to be. Everything seems to work. Half gauntlet doesn't bind. All right. So I think it's time to put this guy on here. So like I said, top bracket, bottom bracket, and all I do is tape the thing on. Way back when I used to use hose clamps, and I got hose clamps, they break. They loosen over time, all that kind of stuff. I haven't used hose clamps in years to put my sword on. I don't see the point. So to tape and make sure that they stay on there, take a length, you know, whatever it is, 3.5 feet-ish there. Spin it around. All you hockey players know this from doing your sticks, but this is a thing I learned in the SCA because I never played hockey when I was a kid. So I wind it around into a piece of rope. And then I got a little sticky tab at the very end here. And yeah, just wrap it around. I want to make sure that the placement is okay. And just wrap it around. Grab it onto it pretty tight. It's got some sticky to it, so that's helpful. Some folks worry a little bit about these edges on the tangs here. I've never seen them cut through this stuff, or if they have, it's been so slow a progression that the stick has been powdered out before it ever shows up. So we've got sort of one length. I like to go down one and up a little bit. I probably won't have enough here. I might, we'll see. And then if you have enough tape, I just finish it off with a few wraps to cover up the mess. And there's the top of the basket hilt sorted out. It's good. I'm pretty much out of tape here, so I'm going to get another roll. So, I don't know if you ever noticed, but on my basket hilts, the ones that I sell, I bend the bottom of the tang up a little bit, and that just helps keep the tape where it's supposed to be. Sometimes, especially on, I used to bend the bracket over in a sort of a 90-degree angle, and I found the tape slipped off if that bend was too short. So I just started making just a little bit of just a little flare out to make sure that doesn't happen. And there's the bottom. Basket hilt is on, solid, works well. Sort of feels really good. Yeah, we'll see how that goes. All right, so now what's left is the thrusting tip and tape up the sword, and then we're done. So the way that I make my thrusting tips is kind of a hybrid of a lot of different folks. I've experimented a lot with what works and what doesn't. For years and years, I used to use just this same nylon webbing. I would just sort of cross it over top of the sword, and I'd glue it on and then stack a bunch of foam on top of it, and that was okay. But that seems to want to blow the corners of the tape out, and so it always looks like my thrusting tip's coming off, and so that wasn't working for me. I was trying a way that Rogan showed me with a special kind of wrap that he uses, and that works really well, but it takes a lot of time, so I didn't like that. And so finally, Gunther told me about seatbelts. So you can get seatbelt material for free from auto wreckers. You can just go in there and cut them out of there. No one wants that stuff. It's super duper strong, and so all I really do is, if you look here, all I really do is, say maybe about half and half, maybe a third and 2/3, somewhere around there, enough for some tape to grab onto this cover here, and a wrap around it, and then stack it up with foam, and then that's that. And that seems to last long enough for the sword to sort of powder out and die, but not so long that it will outlive the sword, because it doesn't need to outlive the sword. So yeah, the way I like to do this is I like to cut a bit of a notch in the top so that this seatbelt material stays flush with the sword, because I don't like swords that look like Q-tips. So I like that sort of low profile thrusting tip look. So I'll just kind of mark. All right, folks, full disclosure here. I've actually completed the sword that I was building before. But when editing the video, I found that it was all scrambled and there was something that went wrong, and the camera angle was weird, and one time it didn't actually record, so there's a bunch of messed up things that happened. So I'm just going to start kind of where we left off, which is building the thrusting tip. So what I did was I took our seatbelt material right here, and I measured to about half, and then I marked a line all the way around the top. So as I said, or maybe I didn't, I like the sword, I like the thrusting tip to be very, very flush with the diameter of the sword. This isn't a requirement, it's just a personal preference thing. So that's what I do. So now that I've got my line cut, I'm going to cut all the way around the sword, and I'm going to chisel it out. So maybe you can see, I'm just using a coping saw here. The blades, I don't know, maybe a few millimeters wide. And I'm going to basically cut to a blade depth. It's kind of difficult to see, but not obviously all the way through the sword, just enough so that I can take a fair amount out with the chisel. So that's that. And so as you can see, you know, it's got about just the blade depth, just as far down as that blade is kind of flush with the top. And that'll give me just about enough I need to chisel out with my chisel. So because I've got a nice sharp edge here, it's easy to take out little bits and pieces of the tip of this rattan. All right, that's pretty much it roughed out. It's reasonably uniform around there, I think. It sort of tapers out. So the way that this tends to work is I dig a little bit down and then come out, but then there's a little more that takes, so it leaves a bit of a, I don't know, sort of a ridge around here. So sometimes I like to go sort of back the other way, just to make sure that it's kind of uniform. All right, I'm not sure if you can tell, but it's just a little bit more narrow in here than it is here, and I'm fine with that because I'm going to put a thrusting tip on here, I'm going to tape on the top, and I'm going to put tape around here and then the seat belt. So it's going to have a little more material around here than it does here, and in the end, hopefully we'll get a nice uniform sort of thrusting tip shape. All right, so here we've got, I just cut these little foam discs out of, I'm not even sure what kind of foam. It's a closed cell foam of some kind. It's very spongy. I recommend that you get the rubberiest foam that you can find, because rubber doesn't break down nearly as fast as that blue plastic foam does. Blue plastic foam will compress over time, and your thrusting tip will just not compress anymore, and that's no good. That'll fail inspection. So I cut these out of a sheet of, oh, it's about 1/2 inch, a little less maybe, of this closed cell foam. I cut them out with a hole saw actually, because it's actually pretty easy. This is what I'm talking about when I say hole saw, and this isn't the same thing that I used to cut them out, but this is the idea. This thing just, so it doesn't, I thought maybe that it would tear the foam to bits, and it's a little bit ragged around the edges, but I'm sort of fine with that. So yeah, I'm just going to take 3 of these guys, stack it up. That's, I don't even know how much that is. Plenty of compression there for a thrusting tip. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to make a little pocket over top, and then I'm going to tape it around here, and then I'm going to put the seat belt around it and tape it all up. So let's see how that works. So in the past, I've taken these and I've actually glued them together with contact cement, and I don't really think that's necessary anymore now that I've sort of come to realize it. All I really do is, without making sure that the foam isn't compressed, I just loosely tape them together, because all this really has to do is hold its shape until I tape it to the sword. So I just go around a few times, kind of twisting as I go, so that it's all enclosed in a pocket. This step isn't hypercritical. All we're looking for is I just don't want these things to be falling off as I'm putting them on here. So that's our pocket of foam. Now I'm going to use fiber tape in order to create a little bit of a, I don't know, sort of a latching mechanism onto here. And all I'm doing here in this next step is making sure that the thrusting tip doesn't come flying out the end. Because again, how this is going to work is, this is going to be here, this is going to wrap around, and so all we're creating in this next step is something to make sure this thrusting tip doesn't come flying out the end. This seat belt is going to keep it from folding over, it's going to keep it from cutting. Hopefully this is going to be a little bit compressed, so only a little bit of the tip is going to be showing of the thrusting tip, so I'll have a spongy tip and then a nice solid base for hacking. So that's the plan, that's the idea. Let's see how it goes. So there's no real magic to this part. It really is just, you know, if you're enterprising, you can glue this to the end of your sword to keep it there. I don't think it's particularly necessary. All I'm doing is making sure that this thing stays on. So I'll do this a bunch of times, sort of overlapping the tape, and you'll see where we go from there. So there's like 1, 2, 3, I think 4. We'll do all of that again, just to make sure we've got enough binding power at the tip of this sword. All right, so there's our sort of pocket. All I want to do now is wrap strapping tape around here so that it will act as a way to hold everything together on here. And again, just keep this thing from flying out the top. A couple of wraps is all it takes. All right, so that's pretty solid. That's what we want. Now, it's time to take a little bit of seatbelt material and dry fit it all together. So I like to have the one side overlap a little bit. So that just means, right about there. Take that, cut it off at length. And then just to make sure things don't unravel, Just burn the edges a little bit. All right, so the tape doesn't really love to stick to this seatbelt material, but you can kind of convince it if you do a long enough run. So that's where I start. That's where it's going to go. I like to have a run sort of all the way around. So that when it gets wrapped, it can wrap nice and tight around the whole thing. Suction on a little bit with the tape. All right. Make sure everything is snug, and then just pull it nice and taut. Now that that's there, I just kind of wrap down, wrap up a little bit, make sure all this stuff gets all tight in here. And then any little ridges and bumps here will basically get buried into this wrap of tape I'm about to do. You probably can't do this with too much force. Once you get, so my rattan ends right about here. Once you get past here, I'm not doing so hard because I don't want to compress this. I don't want to squeeze this foam. I want this foam to be nice and pliable. So we've got a bit of a tip here hanging out. That's going to grab onto bars and things. Down here, it's still very soft, but very cut resistant thanks to the seatbelt material. And yeah, all we got to do now is finish it off with a little bit of hockey tape. I like to use hockey tape because it's frictiony and it's grabby, and that's the kind of things that we need for a thrusting tip. That's all of our downwards wraps, and then I just kind of and that's how I make my thrusting tips. All right, we're at the home stretch now. So I like to do a little bit of fiber tape near the top where all the damage happens. I don't fiber tape the whole thing anymore. I used to not fiber tape it at all, but I don't know. I kind of go back and forth of whether I think this actually does anything or not. Maybe it's just habit. Some people think it holds the rattan together better. I think it tends to be more useful sort of after you've got that first few millimeters of broomstick at the front there. But this sword feels just a little bit on the light side. I think the rattan isn't very, very dense. So this will give it a little more protection, give it a little more weight at the tip. And I think that's about all we need. Feels pretty good. All right. Now just a bit of duct tape to cover the whole thing. And I think You know, if you're still watching, congratulations, because this has been a while. There's not much to duct tape in a sword. I like to make it smooth, so I like to put it in the vise. So that I can kind of do it nice and quick. I don't put a whole lot of tape on swords. If I'm going to retape a sword, I don't like to have a big, giant mess to have to deal with of layer after layer after layer of tape. If anyone is wondering what I think the easiest way to retape a sword is, just real quick, I take an Olfa knife and I just run it like kind of over top of a garbage can, and just flat enough, like I use these black blades that are super duper sharp, just flat enough so I'm not taking any rattan off, and I'm just taking tape off, and it goes really quick. I don't bother trying to pick it off. After the sword gets beat up, it just takes too long. So that's what I think the easiest way to retape swords are, but I don't retape too many swords. Retaping is a thing that we always used to do. We take all the tape off, and then of course it'd be a little bit broomy, a little powdery, and so we'd hard tape the fibers back onto the stick with fiber tape, and then retape it all, because back in the day rattan was a little more scarce around here. These days it seems that it's not that hard to find. Maybe it's because we travel more. Maybe we have more enterprising people bringing rattan in, which is very super handy, and folks like me very much appreciate that. So keep it up, enterprising people. Oh, I hate it when it wrinkles. There's nothing worse than a wrinkly sword. Quotable quotes from Ivar's stick making class. All right. I don't think I have any red tape lying around. It's not an exact view right now anyway. So normally I would use some kind of red tape to mark the edge so that it's red on the edge and a different color up top. Folks like that. It's a little unclear to me whether a thrusting tip has to be a contrasting color to the edge marking tape. Last I read the rules, it said contrasting color, but in any case, we're going to use black and black, and I'm just going to let folks know that I have a thrusting tip. I like to use Gorilla tape for the edge marking tape if I can, because it seems to be a little thicker and deals with a little more punishment. A little extra added layer of protection, if you will. All right, that is very close to done. It's a little bit ratty at the bottom, and it's a little bit ratty at the top, and so I like to just finish it off with some athletic tape, and then that'll be it. And that, as they say, is that. Let's see how it works. All right, so here we have our finished product. One rattan sword, one new sort of style basket hilt, a little bit of a different shape than what I normally sell. Just testing it out. 2 tangs, thrusting tip at the end, nice and soft and squishy to grab onto face grills and nipple rings and all kinds of other stuff. Yeah, it seems to work good. I like the feel of it. It seems to want to flip a little bit, which is good. I like swords that flip. Yeah, I'm not sure what else to tell you. That's how I make my swords. So thanks for watching. Thanks for paying attention. I hope that you found something useful in it. And feel free to let me know however you can if you've got tips for me and how you make your swords, because I'm super interested in all this nerdy sword fighter stuff. It's what keeps me going. So thanks for watching, folks. Take care.